If she liked you, you wouldn't be confused. That sentence alone is going to make some men uncomfortable, not because it's harsh, but because it threatens something they've been holding on to. Because confusion feels safer than certainty. Confusion lets you stay emotionally invested without having to accept an answer you don't want. Confusion keeps the door cracked open just enough for hope to breathe. You tell yourself she's just unsure, that she needs time, that things are complicated, that this is how modern dating works. But here's the part most men don't catch. You weren't confused because things were unclear. You were confused because you stayed after clarity stopped increasing. You replay conversations, you analyze tone, you read between lines that were never meant to be decoded. And the question that keeps looping in your head isn't dramatic. It's quiet, persistent. If she didn't like me, why does it feel like this? This video isn't here to mock you for that question. It's here to confront the part of you that already knows the answer, but hasn't wanted to say it out loud. Because real interest doesn't leave you guessing for long. And confusion, once it lingers, stops being patience. It becomes information. Here's why confusion is so seductive. At first, it doesn't feel like uncertainty. It feels like tension, like something charged is happening beneath the surface. You talk often, not shallow conversation, real ones, late nights, personal topics, things that make time disappear. She opens up to you. She tells you about her stress, her doubts, her past. She laughs with you. She leans on you emotionally. She makes space for you, just enough. From the outside, it looks like progress. From the inside, it feels intimate. And that's why confusion gets mistaken for chemistry. Because chemistry isn't just attraction, it's anticipation. It's emotional energy without resolution. Your nervous system interprets that tension as meaning, as movement, as something forming. So when nothing is defined yet, you assume it's building. That clarity will arrive naturally, that this is just how things start now. But here's the distinction most men were never taught. Chemistry creates momentum. Confusion suspends it. Chemistry moves somewhere, even if slowly. Confusion stays in place while feeling intense. And intensity without direction is dangerous, because it trains you to associate uncertainty with depth. You don't realize you're stuck, because being stuck doesn't feel empty. It feels alive. This is where most men get misled. Because she's there. She responds. She talks to you. She opens up emotionally. She makes you feel included in her inner world. And that creates a dangerous assumption. You start believing that access equals intention. If she didn't feel something, why would she talk to me like this? If she wasn't interested, why would she share this much? If I didn't matter, why would she lean on me emotionally? Those questions make sense, but they're built on a misunderstanding. Access is not choice. A woman can give you access to her emotions without choosing you as a partner. She can enjoy your presence without reorganizing her life around you. She can feel close to you without moving toward you. And that gap is where confusion lives, because from your side, access feels like progress. It feels earned, it feels personal, but choice shows up differently. Choice creates direction. Choice reduces ambiguity over time. Choice changes behavior, not just mood. When someone is choosing you, things don't stay undefined for long. They don't hover in possibility. They don't require you to manage momentum. Instead, you notice clarity increasing. Plans become easier to make. Your role becomes clearer, not fuzzier. But when you're only being given access, something else happens. Time passes and nothing solidifies. You're close but not anchored, included but not integrated, important but not prioritized. And because nothing feels overtly wrong, you stay. That's the trap. You're not being pushed away. You're being kept close without commitment. So you tell yourself stories. She just needs time. She's cautious. She's been hurt before. I don't want to pressure something that feels natural, but ask yourself this honestly. How long has it been unclear? Weeks? Months? At some point, ambiguity stops being a phase and starts being a position. And the hardest part for men to accept is this. If someone genuinely wants you, they don't let you stay unpositioned for long, not because they're perfect, not because they rush, but because interest naturally moves toward clarity. If clarity isn't increasing, it's not because you haven't waited long enough. It's because access is being offered instead of choice. And that distinction, once you see it, is impossible to unsee. Here's the part most men don't want to admit. You don't stay confused because you don't see the signs. You stay confused because the signs threaten something you want to believe. Believing she's unsure feels better than believing she's uninterested. Believing timing is the problem feels better than believing intention is missing. Believing patience will be rewarded feels better than accepting misalignment. So you defend the confusion, you give it the benefit of the doubt, you dress it up as maturity. You tell yourself you're being understanding instead of reactive. You say things like, I don't want to rush her. I don't want to pressure something good. I'm just letting it unfold naturally. But ask yourself this honestly. At what point did waiting stop feeling peaceful and start feeling anxious? At what point did you stop trusting what you felt and start explaining it away? Because there's a moment, and most men remember it clearly, when confusion stops feeling neutral. You notice yourself monitoring the interaction, rereading messages, adjusting your tone, holding back questions you want to ask, not because you're playing games, but because something feels fragile, and fragile connections make men careful. That's when confusion becomes work. You're no longer just present. You're managing, regulating, stabilizing something that never quite settles. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If clarity was coming, you wouldn't feel the need to protect the connection from honest questions. You wouldn't feel like asking where things are going might ruin what's happening. That fear tells you everything. Because real interest doesn't collapse under clarity. It responds to it. So when you avoid asking, when you delay conversations, when you convince yourself waiting is the mature move, you're not protecting the connection. You're protecting yourself from hearing an answer you're already sensing. That's why confusion lingers, not because it's mysterious, but because it's being defended. And the longer it's defended, the more it costs you. Here's what most men get wrong about clarity. They think clarity is dramatic, that it comes with declarations, with intense emotions, with big moments that remove all doubt at once. It doesn't. Clarity is quiet. It feels steady, predictable, grounded. When someone genuinely likes you, you don't feel like you're constantly checking the temperature of the connection. You're not wondering which version of her you're going to get today. You're not bracing for inconsistency. Instead, things start to simplify. Communication becomes easier, not more complex. Plans require less negotiation, not more explanation. Your presence starts to matter in practical ways. You don't just feel wanted emotionally, you're factored in. Your time is respected, your absence is noticed, your role becomes clearer without you having to ask for it. And here's the part that surprises most men. Clarity doesn't feel intoxicating, it feels calm. There's no emotional spike keeping you on edge, no tension you have to interpret as depth, no lingering anxiety that you mistake for chemistry. Because when interest is real, it doesn't need ambiguity to stay alive. So if you're honest with yourself, you can usually feel the difference. Clarity feels like you can relax into the connection. Confusion feels like you have to maintain it. And that difference is everything. If time is passing and your nervous system feels more unsettled, not less, that's not closeness growing. That's uncertainty demanding more of you. And once you understand that, something shifts. You stop asking, why doesn't this feel secure yet? And start asking, what am I compensating for? That question is uncomfortable. But it's also the beginning of honesty. There's a moment most men remember clearly, even if they didn't recognize it at the time. You stop leaning in as much, not to send a message, not to play a game, not to provoke a reaction. You're just tired. Tired of initiating every conversation, tired of carrying the emotional weight, tired of being the one who keeps things warm when they start cooling off. So you pull back slightly. You don't text as fast. You don't initiate as often. You let silence exist instead of rushing to fill it. And at first, you expect something to happen. You expect her to notice, to ask what changed, to step forward and meet you where you are. Because that's what happens when two people are choosing each other. When one steps back, the other responds. When effort drops, the gap gets addressed. When something feels off, it gets named. But instead, something else happens. The connection loses energy. The warmth fades. The effort you were supplying doesn't return from her side. And that's when the confusion collapses into a single, painful realization. Why did this only feel close when I was carrying it? Because when you stop supplying the momentum, the dynamic has to stand on her intention alone. And if intention was there, it would show itself. Not with panic, not with drama, with alignment. But when the connection softens instead of strengthening, that's not a failed strategy. That's the structure being revealed. You didn't break anything by pulling back. You exposed what was already happening. The closeness wasn't mutual, it was maintained. And once you stop maintaining it, there's nothing left to hold it together. That's why this moment hurts so much, not because you lost her, but because you realize how much of the connection was resting on you. And once you see that, it becomes impossible to unsee. Here's what most men don't expect. Silence hurts more than rejection. Rejection has a shape. Someone says no, someone draws a line, someone makes a decision you can react to. It hurts, but it's clean. What you're experiencing here isn't rejection. It's absence without explanation. And absence without explanation messes with the mind. Because nothing was clearly denied. Nothing was officially ended. Nothing definitive was said. So your brain keeps searching. Was it real? Did I misread it? Was I closer than I thought, or farther? And instead of questioning the situation, you start questioning yourself. You wonder if you overestimated your importance, if the confidence you felt was borrowed from her attention, if the role you thought you played was smaller than you imagined. That's where the pain shifts, because heartbreak hurts when you lose someone. But this hurts because you lose certainty about who you were inside the connection. You stop trusting your judgment. You replay conversations. You re-examine moments that never felt suspicious at the time, not because they mattered then, but because they matter now. And this is why silence after you pull away feels humiliating, not because she moved on, but because it feels like she did it without cost, as if what you shared didn't leave a mark, as if your presence didn't register the way you believed it did. That hits deeper than emotion. It hits identity. Because if you mattered the way you thought you did, how was it so easy for the connection to dissolve once you stepped back? That question doesn't come with anger. It comes with shame, a quiet, corrosive shame that tells you, maybe I wasn't as important as I thought. But here's the truth. Most men don't hear in this moment. This wasn't a verdict on your worth. It was a revelation about your position. You weren't rejected. You were never fully selected. And once you understand that distinction, the pain starts changing shape. Here's the realization most men don't arrive at until much later. She didn't pull away because you pulled away. She pulled away because the connection was being held together by your effort. When you stopped leaning in, you didn't change the dynamic. You exposed it. Up until that point, things felt alive because you were smoothing the uncertainty. You were filling in gaps with patience. You were translating mixed signals into meaning. You were carrying momentum where none was being generated naturally. So as long as you stayed engaged, the connection functioned. But the moment you stepped back, the illusion collapsed. Not because you did something wrong, but because there was nothing moving on its own. And this is the part that reframes everything. If someone only feels close while you're giving, that closeness isn't mutual. If warmth only returns when you're about to leave, that isn't attraction, it's regulation. If pulling back causes the connection to fade instead of deepen, it was never growing forward to begin with. And once you see that, the pain starts changing shape. You stop asking, "Why wasn't I enough?" and start asking, "Why was I holding something that wasn't being chosen?" That shift matters because it moves the focus off your worth and onto the structure of the dynamic. You weren't failing to create something. You were maintaining something that had no intention behind it. And that's not something more effort fixes. That's something awareness ends. This is why pulling away doesn't always lead to pursuit. Sometimes it leads to clarity, and clarity hurts, but it also frees. Because once you understand what was actually happening, the experience loses its power to haunt you. You don't need to replay conversations. You don't need to imagine different versions of yourself. You don't need to wonder what you should have done differently. The truth becomes simple. The connection existed because you were sustaining it. When you stopped, it revealed what it was and what it wasn't. And that realization is what finally loosens your grip. Here's what changes once you understand what confusion actually was. You stop treating it like a mystery and start treating it like feedback, not feedback about your worth, feedback about alignment. You realize the goal was never to convince her, never to extract clarity from someone who benefited from keeping things undefined, never to turn patience into commitment. The goal was always alignment. And once you see that, the ending stops feeling like a loss, because you weren't walking away from something that was working. You were walking away from a position that was costing you. Being confused didn't mean you were unwanted. It meant you were available without being chosen. That's a hard sentence, and some men will immediately push back against it. They'll say, "It's not that simple. Every situation is different. She just needed more time." And once you name that honestly, the loop breaks. You stop replaying conversations. You stop wondering if one more message would have changed things. You stop questioning whether you waited long enough or pulled back too soon. Because the question shifts. It's no longer, "What could I have done differently?" It becomes, "Why was I negotiating a place that should have been obvious?" And that question has a clean answer. You don't need dramatic exits. You don't need closure conversations that reopen the same wound. You don't need explanations that go in circles. You move differently. You notice when your presence doesn't change behavior. You notice when interest doesn't translate into action. You notice when connection exists without direction. And you don't argue with that information. You respect it. Because self-respect isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand recognition. It simply withdraws from situations that don't meet the standard. That's how men stop ending up confused. Not by hardening, not by closing off, not by distrusting everyone, but by understanding one thing clearly. Being chosen is obvious. It doesn't require patience. It doesn't require interpretation. And it never requires you to negotiate your place. Some men will hear this and disagree. If this hit too close, say why. Others will recognize their entire situation in it. If this video put language to something you've lived but never fully named, subscribe. Not for motivation, not for noise, but for clarity. Because the more clearly you understand these dynamics, the less time you'll ever spend holding something together that was never meant to move forward, quietly.